Alright, so this is another video where I'm going ahead and reading a piece of work which I wrote a while ago. So this particular one, looking back on it and reading through it, I don't completely like the structure, and I don't sense that the ideas within are explained as well as they could be explained, but I think it's still surprisingly insightful. Not to my own credit though. To the extent that this is insightful, it is more so to the credit of those to whose ideas I stole. Those whose ideas I went and gathered and just put together in the same fashion in some ways, and in different fashions in other ways. And so I'm going to read this again as more practice to be in front of the camera, to become more confident and familiar with it. And I suppose hopefully to be able to speak more clearly and consistently. To work out the lack of clear pronunciations in some things. I suppose that's something that needs to be addressed. So I'm going to read the script. I might have to make some mild adjustments as I go through it, because it's not perfectly put together even in the grammar and the word choice. Alright, here I go. If you want someone to shine, they should believe that you can already see their light. When you give a coworker a compliment or tell a friend that they are valuable, when you share with your lover that they are equivalent to your whole world, you leave an impression. When was the last time you received a compliment? Actually, when was the last time you gave a compliment to somebody else? If you get compliments all the time, then, well, you're ruining my narrative. However, if you're like the rest of us and you are complimented with great scarcity, I want you to think. To think about how great it felt when another person acknowledged some positive quality about you. How much other people light up when you say genuinely nice things about them to them. Now, we're not referring to those empty flatteries that we employ when we want something, but the genuine caring of going out of one's way to say something nice about someone and mean it. You have to mean it. They have to mean it for it to really matter to you. You might be deceived by a well-practiced manipulator, bent on building rapport for future gains. However, rarely can such people deceive our gut feelings. Rarely can they get by without leaving behind a trail of people who don't trust them or believe them to be two-faced. In recognizing this, although it can be tempting, it is apparent that deception or flattery never really pans out. Thus, we have to figure out how to really mean what we say, yet to be uplifting, and say good things about people to them. When you reprimand an employee, for those who speak English, that's one of the problems. I don't know how that got there. When you talk to an employee about poor performance or poor behavior, telling them what has happened is not good and not acceptable, that they have failed to accomplish their allocated task, that they are not doing the right thing. When you tell someone these things, you are doing them a service. You're giving them valuable feedback needed for them to change their behaviors. However, this alone does not come with a motivation to actually change in a meaningful way. If that person does change as you intended them to, it will normally be that they had a strength of character that empowered them to do so. It will have very little to do with your talk to them. And so a person of lesser character, which is almost everybody, will change in ways which aren't nearly as productive. They might produce results only to the extent that is necessary to keep you away, to prevent another reprimand. They might develop insecurities and doubt themselves endlessly, significantly slowing growth. Alternatively, they could earnestly, truthfully tell their colleagues about how you corrected them, and that they felt like you didn't respect them and give them much empathy for their circumstances. These are not good things. But that's okay, because there's a very simple way of avoiding those problems. But it can't be faked. Whether it be outwardly towards your staff or inwardly towards yourself, The simple solution is to care so much about your employees that your reprimands become motivational. To do this, you need to firstly care enough to take a personal interest in the people working for you, to constantly monitor them and observe how they're feeling and the kinds of things that brighten up their day, as well as the kinds of things that diminish their enjoyment. You are to be willing to talk to them when they are distressed and provide them with some degree of emotional comfort. This can be as simple as saying, "I can't begin to possibly understand, but I'm happy to help if there's anything I can do." And meaning it. It could also be, "I've been there. It was a tremendous struggle for me, and this is how I eventually got through this. Perhaps you should try XYZ. Please come and see me if you find yourself unable to bear this challenge. I want you to succeed. And I'm happy to explain the trickier sides of this. Don't worry if your questions seem silly. It's often the most basic stuff that trips up even the best of us." These are responses that show a willingness to admit to a lack of understanding, as well as a willingness to help from a perspective of relationship rather than business. People don't want to work with colleagues and bosses. They want communities, friends who they work alongside, and mentors who instruct them throughout their works. People work to pay their bills, but most people want to be able to work to be a part of something that legitimately cares for them. They want to be loved, not from a perspective of, "so I can get the most money from your work." Instead, from a perspective of, "we love our own, and regardless of your contributions, you're one of us." Which is, by the way, why we want you to succeed. Because even if you don't provide us with increase, we want you to be equipped to be able to prosper elsewhere, should you decide that it is best for you to leave, in which case we'll hug you and support you on your way out. Why have I mentioned these examples? What does any of this have to do with believing that you can already see someone? Why have I mentioned these examples? What does any of this have to do with believing that you can already see somebody's light? Precisely speaking, everything. So, yeah. I think there's some ideas that perhaps were expressed incorrectly or could have been expressed better, but I still found that to be kind of interesting, because when I look back at my past self, I usually expect to see a great deal of incompetence and brokenness of thoughts, and I would argue in some extent that the thoughts here are somewhat broken too. My current thoughts are probably somewhat broken as well. But the relative idea of we're not as communicated as effectively as it could be seems to be pretty good. I'm sure you, the audience, will let me know in the comment section. Anyone seeing this will give me some sense as to whether or not it was crap, or maybe you'll just be distracted about the pandering and the before and after the actual piece of writing. But it was interesting because there is that really, really important value in believing in someone before they believe in themselves. Believing in someone before they're credible to be believed in. Because people aren't what they are. They're in a large part what they can be. And on one side that can be something that they could deteriorate into in the chaos and the disorder. But in another way, it can be the light, the hope, the thing that they can build into, the person who they can become, the integrity they can be established in, the goodness that they can practice. And you'll often find that when parents treat their kids as if their kids are stupid and worthless, regardless of what, let's say, initial IQ testing show, those kids tend to act in a way to satisfy that belief. And when kids are told that they're able to achieve anything and they're treated in such a way to support that endeavor, even when they have relatively low IQs, and I'm only using IQ as the example because it's one of those things that is a good predictor of academic success, and you could make a correlative argument about academic success to financial success to some degree. No, not entirely. If you look at the affluent, it's not it's not such a straight story. Intelligence can act as a means of pride, and it can disincentivize actual improvement or disincentivize humility to go to other people to solve problems. Because when you're used to being in rooms where you're the person who can solve a problem better than everyone else, it's difficult to justify going to someone else to solve a problem. And of course that benefits you in being able to build a business or be more effective in a job role. But for those kids, regardless of their intelligence, their natural genetic advantages or disadvantages, if parents treat them like they're incapable or stupid or that they're not going to succeed, they tend to believe it. And they tend to try and satisfy that desire of a parent, so to speak. But when a parent tells a child that they can be, and then acts in ways which are consistent with that, when they believe in the light before it manifests, because if you believe that a child can be anything, and perhaps that's a bit of an exaggerative example, but if you believe a child can be anything, that child clearly, as they're in that state, cannot achieve anything because their bodies and their minds are fundamentally undeveloped. But with time, if you maintain that expectation of what they could be, and you show that to them, and you show that to them in the ways in which you try and train them and help them, in the ways in which you treat them with some kind of dignity and respect, they're much more likely to move in such a way to manifest that which is good, that which is beneficial. And so I guess in a simpler sense, that's the heart of the matter of where the peace derived from, the reality that believing in people before they show signs of being worthy of being believed in is crucially important. Obviously not all people are going to come through and actually match up to that standard and that belief in them, so to speak, but more people will than those who don't. No, that's not right. More people will step up if you believe in them than they would have if you don't believe in them. If you don't see the light that's within them. And I suppose this circles back to yourself. If you don't have any expectation or any belief that you can amount to anything, it affects your willingness to do things that are hard, because if you can't amount to anything, or there's some kind of fundamental incompetence that can't be resolved, why bother? But if there's a possibility that you can improve, that you can become better, it justifies taking responsibility for your circumstances. It justifies doing that little bit extra. A little bit extra, which is the change that is needed to actually move you from point A to point B in an upwards direction rather than a downwards direction. Because moving forwards tends to require some kind of discomfort, some kind of suffering, some kind of frustration. It usually requires some degree of warring within yourself. And if you're guaranteed to lose the war, mounting that white flag doesn't seem so bad. But if there is some light within yourself, just as for others, if they can be convinced that there's light within them because someone else sees it and gives them the chance and acts towards them as if they are worth it, maybe you can win. And maybe you should pick up the sword and the shield and run into the battlefield. maybe it'll be worth it. Maybe on the other side there can be some peace, so to speak. One of those tragic realities is as you develop and improve more and more and more, what can happen instead is more and more responsibility up to the extent of your capacity is added. But as you become familiar with the pursuing of a challenge, the burden of the increase of responsibility lessens. And that in of itself is a kind of peace. It's a kind of alleviation of stress, especially when it persists with the knowledge that you've overcome similar relative battles before, like relative to where you were, and that it's achievable and that it can be done. And so even if the odds are mounting against you, they've been mounting against you in the past, and you were able to come through. And so there's less reason to stem in hopelessness and discontent and fear and frustration, because there is a possibility of winning. And you know that because a possibility of winning presented itself and you took it. And you won. Perhaps I'm going to cut most of this out. We'll see. Nonetheless, thanks for watching. I hope you all have a good one. Here you go. Nonetheless, thanks for watching. I hope you all have a good one.